Shift into an attitude of gratitude.
Welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show, where we'll be discussing leadership, business, human potential, inspiring you to live rich from the inside out. Unlock your creativity, stretch out of your comfort zone, break through your barriers, take inspired action, and achieve epic results. Now here's your host, 3-time best-selling author, speaker, and certified executive coach, Debra Kasowski.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show. I'm your host, Debra Kasowski, and I love bringing you guests that are from around the world that are going to inspire, educate you, and motivate you into taking inspired action. Today, I have Kitti McKay, and she is a Canadian ADHD coach behind DeclutterTheBrain.com, who knows firsthand that physical clutter is just a clue of one's mental clutter within. Also known as your ADHD spokescat, Kitti maintains that once you understand why behind the external chaos, you're much better equipped to keep it at bay for good. Enjoy vastly improved productivity, relationships, and self-esteem to boot. Her one system is simple, step-by-step method designed so her clients can clear the years of clutter without getting completely overwhelmed by the process. Please welcome Kitti McKay to the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Debra. Thank you. Thank you. Great introduction.
Well, it's so wonderful to have you. And I have so many questions that are popcorning in my head today. And I'm just curious, what brought you to where you are today with decluttering the brain for people?
Oh, good heavens. It's been a journey and an evolution. How long you got? A long time ago when I was living in Banff, I had a small cleaning business, and I found myself almost compulsively rearranging people's furniture and what have you so that I don't know, just so it flowed better. And people invariably said, it just feels better in here. Not cleaner, but it just feels better. Little did I know that was feng shui in action. Fast forward, moved to Atlantic Canada and started in-home decluttering, and then virtual decluttering at the suggestion of my business coach. And then as that evolved over the next couple of years, I started to notice that, about 90% of my clients could have been sisters or brother from another mother. I thought, well, this is interesting. And then the shoe dropped. Someone that I had gone to this business, a colleague of mine with this business coach, she phoned me out of the air and said, would you like to be on my podcast? And she is an ADHD coach. And I said, why me? And she said, oh, when we met, I had you pegged. And then as being ADHD, I'm still not officially diagnosed. Now, then I started looking at all the clients, and I really looked into it, researched it, and then we did that podcast / webinar. It was a bit of both, and 350 of the people who tuned in, well, they were all ADHD, and that's how it's come to that. Is to help these people who clutter affects a little bit more than the average person.
Wow. So, Kitti, I know like all of us have some external chaos at some point. Some of it is papers, some of it is things, some of it, we think of hoarding. And I just want to talk about, people's environments. When it comes to being able to work and have your clear mind, because I remember as a teenager, I think I bought this poster once. And not that I was a very messy person, but it so resonated with me, the picture. And it was, this mess is a place. But through the years, I've also learned that your environment influences so much of your productivity, that papers piled up and, all these purchases that you don't know what to do with, or you thought you needed, that you purchased, and you're putting them in the spare bedroom and things like that. Um, can you just talk a little bit about how that environment really impacts how productive we are in life? And when we talked about in your bio, how it impacts your relationships, how it impacts your own self-esteem.
Oh, good heavens, that's a good question. It has a huge impact, of course, because I think that it just clogs your brain. Say, for example, if and then I'm going to get to the relationships part,
Sure.
but let's use the messy desk, for example. And you can't find you're about to meet with your client in 3 or 4 minutes, and you can't find their file. Well, you feel like an idiot when you get on with that client and you're scrambling and you're losing credibility. We're talking to business owners right now, right? That they're losing their credibility, or they can't find a bill, late bill payment. All of these things add up to making you feel less than, to making you feel like you're not in control. And isn't feeling in control really central to your feeling of keeping it together in your relationships, whether they be relationships with your spouse or your boss or your co-workers? If you don't feel like you're in control, then people are not going to treat you like you're in control of your life. And that can have some pretty serious consequences in the form of arguing, in the form of fighting, in the form of not being promoted. Are we on this? Am I making sense?
Absolutely. And you know what, Kitti, what I'm thinking about when it comes to those papers on the desk, and if you can't find the one that you need for that important meeting, what I like to think about is, when I think about papers on my desk, I think about, wow, I saved that paper because I think it's something I need for later. And then there's another later pile, or I need to address this, or this is a great article, I should read it later. And I think those later
Yes.
things, that someday builds up because it's not on the calendar.
Yeah.
How do you help people really, when they're touching those papers? Because I know that people have different systems. When I pick up that later, should I be scanning it into a document? Like, what do you suggest to people?
To keep it first thing that comes to my mind is keep it as simple as possible. Whatever your filing system is, keep it as simple as possible. If you're tech savvy, absolutely scan it and put it in your computer where it may get lost. Unless you have a good filing system, which I was reasonably new to computers, and I couldn't find anything. If you're a paper kind of person, which many people are, and certainly ADHDers are, then have a simple system that you can file and make sure that you label absolutely everything.
Yeah.
I have a couple of binders down to my left here that I haven't labeled yet. Physician, heal thyself. And but I know what they are, but it still gives me that little frustration. Is that one for that one category or another? And color coding at the top of each of my sheets of paper, it's either it's color coded. I'll have say, for example, your name, Debra, and then it's underlined in green for podcast.
Right.
So that I can automatically find it if it hasn't gotten into the binder yet. I know automatically what it's for in the later pile.
Right.
Magazine articles, Oh golly, when you've got everything available on Google, that's a tough one. But paper is so oh, it's so nice. It's nice to be able to pick up something, isn't it? That's not on a
Yeah.
screen. It's very seductive. That's the word that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Again, a binder. I don't think that you can be too organized.
Hmm.
But as you said, everybody has a different system, and you've got to use the one that is right for you. And there's so many gurus that they'll advocate one thing or another thing. But at the end of the day, I have to come back to saying, just keep it simple as you can. And it's going to evolve too. You're not going to come up with the exact right system for you right away. The one that I have has evolved over the last year and a half. It's taken
Right.
that long to
Yeah.
figure out, oh, color. Yes, color works.
So when I think about, ADHD and people who are heavy multitaskers, because
Mhm.
there's got to be some significant difference. Can you share with the audience the difference between, someone who may be diagnosed with ADHD versus someone who's a general multitasker that could show up with very similar tendencies?
Yeah, multitasking. Now you've heard, of course, you've heard it said that multitasking is a myth. And that's that is open to debate. An ADHDer by definition should not try to multitask at all, because walking and chewing gum, you're doing not too badly, but but the ADHD brain cannot switch easily, transition we call it, between one task and another.
Mhm.
So for me to go from, golly, no, I'm trying to think. For me to go from writing a paper immediately into this podcast,
Right.
no, can't do it. Have to give myself at least 15 minutes transition time in
Okay.
between it. Now, if you are the other, about 5% of the world's population is ADHD. So if you're the other 95%, you have no problem with that transition. You can bam, 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 bam from one thing to the other to the other. And those are the people who say to people like us, well, why can't you just jump from, and we just
Mhm.
medically can't. So that brings itself some challenges when it comes to, oh, if you can't multitask, then you have to make allowances for, well, yes, I do need that transition. That can be really frustrating because you want to multitask, you want to be all over the place and doing all of these things, but frankly, you can't. But if you do learn to focus your energy and your attention, you can be even more productive than the multitasker. And again, there are different schools of thought on whether multitasking is effective or not.
Well, the word focus itself is focus on one course until successful. And I
Mhm.
love how you talk about how someone with ADHD, if they have learned to focus and concentrate on their one area, that they could be more efficient, more productive than someone who is a multitasker. So, what does the person with ADHD or the focused individual, what do they have over the multitasker?
They have challenges and they have strengths. Again, the challenge is getting their brain to simmer down and focus. Now, of course, there are meds for that, which I don't take. I rely on ginseng. If you ever need to really double down on something, ginseng or ginger tea, some people say. Uh, but those would be the challenges. The strength is once we do focus, we hyper focus, and absolutely nothing and no one can get in our way. And that can be a super strength. So sometimes people say, wow, how did you get so much done in a short period of time? because all of the brain cells were finally able to simmer down, realize what the task is at hand, and just go at it. Or if, in a case of emergency, apparently, I read this a long time ago, an ADHDer is the person that you want around you in case of emergency. Why? They're the ones who don't freak out because they're the ones hyper focusing. They just something in the brain. Again, that's not a
Right.
conscious decision.
Right.
We'll just say, okay, yeah, I'm running into the burning building, and don't think twice about it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's fascinating. And one of the things that I was thinking about was, I know with sometimes when people get a diagnosis, they see it as a label. And
Mm.
then I also think about speakers or people aspiring to be speakers who may have come from different cultural backgrounds or different parts of states, and they have accents and they have, different tones to their voices, and they're wanting to hide that so much. And even the ADHD that, maybe there's people who don't want because there's a stigma attached to it. But
Yes.
what I'm hearing is there's a way to shift into a really positive mindset without labeling yourself by a title.
Yes, there has been, in fact, for many years, you're right, since it was pretty much labeled back in the 80s, and you'll remember the book, You Mean I'm Not Stupid, Lazy, or Crazy? I think I've got the title wrong. Addressing ADHD. There is still a stigma. In fact, a client of mine is a nurse, and there are many people that, including employers, that she has not told that she's ADHD because she's afraid that she will be judged as less than capable.
Right.
When there's an example of a nurse, right,
Right.
who's hyper focusing on her clients and keeping completely calm while
Mm-hmm.
her brain is racing.
Right.
Okay, what's my next step with this patient? Kind of thing. Now, the stigma I am looking to, I'm actually on what I hope will be a long-term mission to eradicate that stigma. And many of my colleagues in the industry agree with this as well. I don't know if they still have this expression, but do you remember ability? It would say disability, and then the dis was crossed out. That in fact it was an advertisement for handicapped people. This is many years ago. You're too young for that. We're looking to focus on our strengths, on our ability to hyper focus on things, on our ability to be really nitpicky detailers, to go deeper, to be more creative, to be the entertainers in society. So in my Facebook group, I've got a feature called the ADHDer of the day. So many entertainers are ADHD, like Cher, Justin Timberlake, Michael Jordan, all of these people who go past the quote disability and make raving successes of themselves. Why? Because they're risk takers, and which is a hallmark that can be certainly a strength of ADHD. The idea is to get over, we were talking about mental clutter before in the bio. The idea is to get over your mental clutter, your negative images, and buckle down and make a decision and say, yes, this is in fact what I'm going to do, because ADHDers also don't make decisions well. They can't make decisions to save their life, which is why they have to streamline. Do you know anybody who wears the same, say for example, a realtor, my acquaintance here, he wears the same shirt on Monday, a different color on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I adopted that. Why? Because it makes morning no decisions a no-brainer.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we come up with so that we don't have to make those decisions. Our brain doesn't use mental energy. Do you ever notice if you've got something particularly trying, or you've got you've had some stress maybe in the family, and you feel absolutely knocked out the next day, and you don't know why? Deborah?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that it's mental stress will kill you. You've heard that before.
Hmm.
It tires you out more than anything. Well, these daily little decisions exhaust the brain, at least our brain. So.
So that's interesting, and I don't want to take for granted that our listeners and, viewers here on YouTube automatically know what ADHD is. And I'd like to think a lot of people do, but those who don't, it is for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And one of the hallmarks of this is that it affects their attention, as you heard in our conversation. It affects self-control, harder time staying focused. They can be more fidgety than others, and often when you think about it with kids, that's generally when a lot of people get diagnosed. And as you said earlier, not having a diagnosis, there's a lot of adults out there who may have this diagnosis, but have never been diagnosed. And, I'm just thinking about behaviors and characteristics. And I think it's fascinating and in such a positive way to have this ADHD coach to really fine tune some of the things that could be seen as drawbacks. Now, when I think of entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, and some other ones, they wore the black t-shirt, black pants, and I don't even know if he has a diagnosis of ADHD, but what
Yes,
he did that for, pardon?
yes, the answer
Yeah.
to your question is yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really to streamline that decision making. And I've also, in some of my reading, I know entrepreneurs, when they had to get stuff done, they needed to conserve as much energy as possible. So they would have the same meal for breakfast, same meal for lunch, maybe go off on something different for supper. They'd wear the same clothing, have it laid out for all the days that they were binging on their project, just to stay super focused. And I find it fascinating how you said, this person wore a different color each day, but he knew what color for what day. And that streamlines conserving that energy. So even whether you have ADHD or not, if you're working on something really intense and you need to be streamlining your energy, because really when it comes down to it, time management is really energy management.
Absolutely. I could not have said that better. That's oh wow. No, absolutely. It is. And energy, we only have so much of it. And at the end of the day, you're the one who has to manage it. Nobody else can decide what you're going to spend your mental energy on. Am I going to get annoyed at that person who was rude to me in the grocery line? No, it's not worth my energy. You were just mentioning about the clothing. Do you know how I know what day it is?
By the color you're wearing.
Pink. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The people
So it's really about building those systems.
Yes, absolutely. And then one tie for the week, and completely streamlined.
Yeah. So how important is it for someone with ADHD to declutter the brain?
Oh, essential. Because when people have come to me, you asked about how I got started. They come to me with physical clutter, and most of my clients have been with me for about a year now. And I asked them, we pretty much got you physically done. Do you think that I should still be doing telling people that I do physical decluttering, and they say, oh yes, that's why we came to you, because physical clutter, I really believe that it is just a clue to the mental clutter within. And once you clear the physical, then the mental will happen. But also at the same token, it's a chicken and the egg syndrome. Which came first? And I I don't have an answer to that question. I really
Right.
don't, because
Yeah.
one seems to beget the other. A perfect example, can I share?
Sure.
All right. So, Monday morning, I will usually, now I live alone, and the cat, he just won't lift a paw. Uh, so I'll start the week, everything is reasonably pristine. And then by Wednesday, things are starting to pile up. I'm a neat freak, yes, but the kitchen counter is not looking as pristine as it did on Wednesday. So, or I should say on Monday. So I'll clear it. So I feel better, and I think more clearly. But also at the same time, why did it start to get cluttered with a water pitcher or a water bottle or what have you? Because my brain was getting busier and more tired and more cluttered with work. So it couldn't only handle, well, either I focus my energy on the one on work, or on the kitchen, on keeping the kitchen counter clean. Now that doesn't sound like it should be a big deal, does it?
No, it seems like, should be quick fix, right?
It should, but just sometimes the more busy the brain gets, the less importance it puts on keeping things decluttered.
Right.
And then once you have done your decluttering, this sounds like, wow, who cares? Well, it does make a huge difference, because you will think, guaranteed, more clearly. And there's some feng shui involved in that, about keeping the energy flowing. And I do a fair bit of that as well. It just, eh, people unanimously say, yes, I feel better. I'm feeling more clarity. I'm
Right.
feeling like I can cope better, and that's ADHD or no.
Right.
It's just universal, and it's difficult to describe. When people ask me these questions, there isn't an actual scientific reason for it. It just is. It
Yeah.
just is.
Yeah.
And that's where Declutter the Brain came from, because I used to be called Clutter Solutions by Kitti, and that was pegging me as an organizer. But the
Right.
more I realized that when I was helping clients with their physical clutter, and then I'm curious, why do they have it? Why can they not get rid of their sentimental items?
Hmm.
Things like that. Okay, because every time they pick up some of their mother's things, they can remember exactly what conversation was being happening. And so that's why they can't go through the decluttering
Yeah.
process. There's always a why behind
Right.
it.
See, and I
And
find that fascinating because, to someone who is not attached to the items, they'll be like, what do you need that for? That's nothing, and for them, they're so detached from it.
that's
But
right.
when you are working with someone, there's an attachment to why they hang on to things.
Yes. And that is where you mentioned about relationships before. Huge. And one spouse says to another, oh, just get rid of it. Uh, well, number one, that's making the person make a decision. Number two,
Mm.
no, it's not that easy. Is it, should I get rid of this sentimental item or that sentimental item? People who are spouses can be very well-meaning, and as you just said, well, there's no attachment to it. But if you do have that attachment, that can be very difficult. And You know what? Can I give you a quick trick that I shared with my
Sure,
shared with here
absolutely.
today? If any of your listeners are faced with something like that, they know that they have a pile of sentimental things that have to be gone through, and they have no idea how they're going to go through it. You know, you've got grandma's old brooch, for example, things like that. Pretend that you're moving cross country. That will help you prioritize like you don't believe. Because how do you make a decision between a rock concert that you attended with your best friend, you've got their ticket stubs, or the ticket stubs from when you went to Shakespeare with your parents?
Right.
Which you're going to feel a little guilty about making that decision, aren't you?
Hmm.
All right.
And that's
And
if you're someone who saves the ticket stub, right?
yeah, exactly. And ADHDers have been labeled as, and I hate to use this expression because it's got such a bad rap, as hoarders. I disagree with that term completely.
Right.
Um, saving it for, what did you say? Later?
Later.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
read it later. I'll do that later. Yeah.
Exactly. They're saving it. They're saving it for later. Well, eventually you will have to go through that stuff, or someone will have to do it for you.
Yeah.
And the kind thing is to go through it first. But if you
Yeah.
are ever faced with that possibility, imagine you just ask yourself. And I did this just
Yeah.
on Victoria Day. I spent 2 hours in my closet and I played this. I said to myself, will I take this back to Alberta with me?
Mm-hmm.
Nope. Will I? Nope. All right, we are rolling. So
Right.
I hope that one of your listeners and viewers will be able to use that. It's
That's
good for
awesome.
everybody.
That's awesome. So, Kitti, tell us more about your one system.
Yes. Focusing system, based on a book by Gary Keller. It's called The One Thing. But I actually read his book after I started doing it this way. When I help people declutter, and 9 times out of 10, it's not just the one room, it's the whole house that's just gotten taken over. Right? Well, what's your instant reaction? Overwhelm, fear. How on earth am I going to get this done? Bad feelings about how did I let it get this way? All of these things.
Right.
There's only one way that I have found that will alleviate that, and that is one system, one room at a time. And it's deceptive. All right, one room at a time, one area of that room at a time, one thing at a time. And what I mean by that is you've got, say, for example, the whole house. You're going to have to choose one room. Do not try to, well, I'll do a little bit in this room, and then I'll do a little bit in the next room, and a little bit, I'll come back and forth. Don't try to do that, because you'll lose your focus. You'll forget
Right.
where you are. You'll be more efficient just sticking with the one task, and then the one area of that room at a time.
Right.
Is just focus on one thing. It just comes down to focusing, and then one thing at a time.
Yeah.
In that room.
And that's valuable for everyone listening, everyone viewing, because, often when you get started in the middle of a room, you end up hopping from one section to one section and you just have piles of mess versus working in one area, getting that done, moving over to another area. Do you have any tips or strategies for us? Should we have boxes out like this is for donate? Can you give us a few tips?
And the tips that I'm going to offer, I don't think that they're not that much different from your standard decluttering tips. but one that I'm told makes my system a little bit different. You have your sections. You've got bags, let's say, of keep or pile, what have you. Let's call it a pile. You've got your keep pile, you've got your keep pile and your toss pile and your donate. All right, so toss is for garbage, donate is for donate, and keep, you know for sure that you love it, you want it. I advocate a maybe pile, and it, there are different schools of thought on that. Some people have argued with me vehemently about the maybe pile. Well, it leaves the possibility of waffling. I have found it to be very, very valuable. Why? Because it can lessen the guilt about, I have to make a decision right now.
Right.
And that can be so stressful. Whereas if you give yourself a little bit of a break, my clients have all started, oh, good, I get a maybe pile. Excuse me. And then less and less they start adding to the maybe pile as their decision-making skills get stronger. Because imagine, if you will, let's say that you're right sizing, which is what I was doing a lot of my in homework here before virtual, and you've got 30 years worth of stuff. That is a lot to not only a lot of things, but a lot of emotions. Your children's drawings that were on the fridge, your grandchildren's things, the Christmas ornaments that you remember when you and your husband bought. This is heartbreaking to have to do. But if you've got yourself a little bit of a maybe pile, then you're downsizing from a 3-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom condo. Huh? That's tough. That's overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if you can cut yourself some slack and have that maybe pile, and make sure that you get rid of the toss right away and the donate right away. If you're living in the city, donate places, we won't mention any names, but donate places they're everywhere. Unless you're in lockdown like we are right
Yeah.
in Atlantic Canada. But by and large, you should be able to. Here's another trick. Make sure that you get rid of it right away. Put it at the front door as soon as you're done for the day.
Yeah.
And take it out, put it in the car, what have you. Resist it and you will resist the temptation to go back through it and second guess yourself, because that is killer. That will just destroy your efforts right there.
Well, thank you so much, Kitti. You gave us some tips, some strategies. It's all really about streamlining systems, finding what works for you individually, building in that focus and attention. Because once you do, that's your superpower, right? It's a superpower to be able to be hyper vigilant and focus in, dial in on exactly what it is that you need to do, and knowing that you can be more productive than someone who is multitasking. Just winding up our interview here, Kitti, I like to ask our guests, what is one book that has had a profound impact in your life?
Oh, I guess the first thing that comes to, I read a couple books a week. So that's a difficult question. But I suppose really that book would be the one that I mentioned before, The One Thing by Gary Keller of Keller Williams Real Estate. And some people love it, some people do not. A colleague of mine said it doesn't resonate for her. But anyone that other than, she's the only person that I know that it hasn't resonated for. Why? Because it helps you to realize that if you narrow it down to one thing, no matter whether you're decluttering, whether you're anything, it's a multi-purpose book.
Yeah, no, fabulous. Thank you. And what does it mean to you to live rich from the inside out?
Rich from the inside out. At peace. not feeling frazzled. Um, Conceptual questions can be very difficult for ADHD. So guys, so don't mind me if I'm
No,
not
take your time. Take your time.
rich from the inside out, feeling, I guess, really not frazzled and in control of where I'm going, what my thought processes are, where I want to take other people.
Yeah. Very powerful. It sounds very much being in flow, being at peace with self. Really love that, Kitti. Now, how can people stay in touch with you or do work with you?
Ooh, um, come and visit my website, www.declutterthebrain.com, and if they like to visit. And unfortunately, I want to pick up the PDF and show them, but it is called 7 Easy Steps to Conquer Your Mental and Physical and Mental Clutter. It's intended as a daily grounding tool for your declutter journey and beyond, and it's basically an all-purpose, no nonsense approach to staying on top of it all for good. And that's the best thing, is if you can stay on top of it all for good.
Fantastic, Kitti. I love it. It's all about no BS, straight goods. These are some easy things to do, and that's what our listeners and viewers like, things that cut to the chase and really help us dive in and execute as soon as possible, because the show is all about principles of life, leadership, and business, and all of these principles are transferable to different areas of your life. So listening to all those tips and strategies, and it's such an honor to have you here on the show sharing that wisdom with us. And for those of you who may be diagnosed with ADHD, or even those who want to become more focused, please take a listen again to this podcast. Take some notes. I love when people take a snapshot of, the episode that they are listening to or viewing, and, tag us in social media so that we can share what nuggets you took away from the interview. It's very, very powerful in sharing that news. So thank you again, Kitti, for coming on the show. Really appreciate having you here.
Thank you for having me, Deborah. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, for those of you who are listening, please go over to my website as well at www.debrakasowski.com. You're going to get your 3-part video course on making habits stick, to find out what your derailers are, stay focused on track, and make those goals and dreams a reality. Now, if you're interested in coaching, you can go to my website. There is a form there to fill out. We will set up a discovery session, see if we're the right fit, and check out your dreams and goals and see how we can accelerate those into making them happen. As Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. On behalf of Kitti and myself, go out and make today great.